is election night in America, and it will be election night in America every night for the next 29 days until November 5th, the final election night of the season. Voting is already underway at early voting locations and with mail-in ballots in this country. Over 2 million votes have already been cast. 53% of those votes are from registered Democrats, 31% are from registered Republicans. As usual, Donald Trump stupidly discourages early voting while Democrats encourage early voting. Vice President Harris had no campaign events today, but at the Vice President's residence in Washington, D.C., she invoked the Israeli tradition of planting a tree to honor the memories of the victims of the October 7th attack in Israel exactly 1 year ago today.
The Jewish philosopher, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, wrote, and I quote, "Religion begins with a consciousness that something is asked of us." So in this moment, on the 1 year commemoration of October 7th, what is asked of us? What is asked of us? First and foremost, I believe that we must never forget. I will never forget October 7th, and the world must never forget. What is asked of us? We must work to ensure nothing like the horrors of October 7th can ever happen again. And on this solemn day, I will restate my pledge to always ensure that Israel has what it needs to defend itself, and that I will always work to ensure the safety and security of the Jewish people here and around the world. What is asked of us? We must reunite the hostages held in Gaza with their families, and I will never stop fighting for the release of all the hostages, including the American citizens, living and deceased. Omer, Idan, Sagi, Keith, Judy, God, and Ite. What is asked of us? We must uphold the commitment to repair the world, an idea that has been passed on throughout generations of the Jewish people and across many faiths. And to that end, we must work to relieve the immense suffering of innocent Palestinians in Gaza who have experienced so much pain and loss over the year.
As the first Jewish spouse of an American president or vice president, I take this role very seriously. Kamala is the one who encouraged me to use my platform I have to fight against anti-Semitism and hate. She is also the person who encouraged me to lean into my Jewish faith. When we first moved into this residence, we affixed a mezuzah on the doorpost with our family present. Now, as we prepare to leave a legacy of our time here, we plant this pomegranate tree to honor this solemn day and for the families who will come after us to enjoy. This is the first tree we planted since we moved in here, and it'll be the first fruit tree ever planted by a second family at the residence. Kalma and I are proud to continue a tradition with this symbolic meaning for every family that's lived here and who will live here.
Donald Trump was afraid to participate in what has become a presidential campaign tradition of both candidates appearing in a special edition of 60 Minutes for an interview. Donald Trump promised to do it, and then last week, he took the cowardly course of backing out of the interview.
The campaign offered shifting explanations. First, it complained that we would fact-check the interview. We fact-check every story. Later, Trump said he needed an apology for his interview in 2020. Trump claims correspondent Leslie Stahl said in that interview that Hunter Biden's controversial laptop came from Russia. She never said that. Trump has said his opponent doesn't do interviews because she can't handle them. He had previously declined another debate with Harris, so tonight, may have been the largest audience for the candidates between now and Election Day.
Donald Trump is afraid of debating Kamala Harris again, and he's afraid of 60 Minutes, and that could be because he simply does not have the mental capacity to survive a 60 Minutes interview now. That question was raised in the New York Times reporting about Donald Trump's apparent cognitive decline that has been on display publicly, which includes Donald Trump claiming to have run for president against Barack Obama, which never happened, and mixing up names of countries, including confusing Iran and North Korea, along with outbursts of incoherent rage. It could be that the campaign staff decided that a Trump appearance on 60 Minutes would be not survivable at this point in what they perceive to be Donald Trump's cognitive decline. Vice President Harris, of course, delivered her commitment to join the special edition of 60 Minutes for an interview. She delivered on her commitment to join 60 Minutes for an interview tonight.
We supply Israel with billions of dollars in military aid, and yet Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to be charting his own course. The Biden-Harris administration has pressed him to agree to a ceasefire. He's resisted. You urged him not to go into Lebanon. He went in anyway. Does the U.S. have no sway over Prime Minister Netanyahu?
The work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Do we have a real close ally in Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think, with all due respect, the better question is, do we have an important alliance between the American people and the Israeli people? And the answer to that question is yes.
It is entirely possible that no undecided voters will see the Vice President's 60 Minutes interview, but it is very likely that undecided voters, especially undecided women voters, will see her interview on a podcast hosted by Alex Cooper, which has the second highest audience of any podcast in America, with an audience that is 24% Republican and 20% independent.
We have a woman named Amber Thurman who died in Georgia because the abortion bans in that state, the doctors were too afraid to treat her. I know that you spoke to her family. What was that conversation like?
It was heartbreaking, Alex. It was heartbreaking. Her mom and her two sisters. And so Amber was a young mother of a 6-year-old son. She was a medical assistant who was so excited because she was just getting on her feet to be independent. She got her own apartment in a gated community with a pool that her son could play in. She got accepted to nursing school. She was, as described by her family, so excited and so ambitious, and she had plans. Then she found out she was pregnant, and she didn't want to go through with her pregnancy, and she was living in Georgia, and she couldn't receive care there because she was past 6 weeks. Here's the thing that's so messed up about this. Some of these people will say, whoa, but I do believe in exceptions. I believe that there should be an exception in terms of in the life of the mother. Okay, here, let's talk about this. This gets back to, again, practical application of policy. Okay, so you believe there's an exception that the person should receive abortion care if the life of the mother is at risk. You know what that means in practical terms? She's almost dead before you decide to give her care. What? So we're going to have public health policy that says a doctor, a medical professional, waits until you're at death's door before they give you care? That's outrageous that anybody would be saying that that is acceptable policy. So until everything that physically could happen to your body in terms of deterioration, only at the point that, oh, she might die, Is she going to get care? Where is the humanity?
I do want to clarify something. In the debate, former President Trump claimed that some states are executing babies after birth. Can you just clarify?
That is not happening anywhere in the United States. It is not happening, and it's a lie. It's a bold-faced lie that he is suggesting that, can you imagine? Can you imagine? He is suggesting that women in their 9th month of pregnancy are electing to have an abortion. Are you kidding? That is so outrageously inaccurate, and it's so insulting to suggest that that would be happening and that women would be doing that. It's not happening anywhere. This guy is full of lies. I mean, I just have to be very candid with you.
Full of lies. Kamala Harris asked, where is the humanity? Where is the humanity? Donald Trump seems to have none, not a shred of humanity. Donald Trump said today that he believes that immigrants to this country are genetically inferior human beings. That is exactly what Adolf Hitler thought and said. Donald Trump doesn't seem to remember that he is a descendant of immigrants to this country, including his mother, who was an immigrant. 2 of the mothers of Donald Trump's children are immigrants. Donald Trump said today, quote, we've got a lot of bad genes in our country right now. And again, that is almost word for word what Adolf Hitler was saying in the 1930s before he started World War II and before he started an organized extermination program of the Jewish people, in which Adolf Hitler's ambition was to execute every living Jewish person he could find anywhere in Europe. Because, among other things, he believed the bad genes theory that Donald Trump believes and spews in his poisonous madness and relentless stupidity. At 78 years old, we don't know how much longer the world will have to endure Donald Trump's Hitlerian ranting. But we should expect that for every year Donald Trump has left, he is going to get worse. Today's print edition of the New York Times carries an account of Donald Trump's cognitive decline and poisonous rantings under the headline, Trump's speeches increasingly angry and rambling reignite the question of age. Times reports, some of what he says is inexplicable, except to those who listen to him regularly and understand the shorthand, and he throws out assertions without any apparent regard for whether they are true or not. Lately, he has claimed that crowds Ms. Harris has drawn were not real, but the creation of artificial intelligence, never mind the reporters and cameras on hand to record that. Talking on another occasion about how tough illegal immigrants are, he drifted off into a soliloquy about whether actors could portray them in a movie. They can't play the role. They'll bring in a big actor, and you look and you say, look, he's got no muscle content. He's got no muscle. We need a little muscle. Then they bring in another one, but he's got a weak face. He looks weak. Still, he has a rather high regard for his own physique. I could have been sunbathing on the beach, he said at another point. You have never seen a body so beautiful, much better than Sleepy Joe, and I am deeply sorry for delivering that pornographic image of Donald Trump sunbathing on a beach, but I am just reading a New York Times report here. That's what that was. The Times also reports that Donald Trump, quote, vividly recounted how the audience at his climactic debate with Vice President Kamala Harris was on his side, except there was no audience. The debate was held in an empty studio. No one went crazy, as Mr. Trump put it, because no one was there. Donald Trump actually said the audience that wasn't there went crazy. Went crazy in a room where there was no audience. on Twitter, I asked the question, if Donald Trump gets dementia, how will we know? Now he's imagining an audience in a room where there was no audience. Are we there yet? He publicly fantasizes about having to choose between being eaten by sharks or being electrocuted by an electric boat, apparently thinking that only an electrically powered boat has batteries on it, and not knowing that every boat, except some very tiny sailboats, has a battery on it. In fact, the old yacht that Donald Trump once owned before he had to sell it in bankruptcy had gigantic batteries on it. And he didn't seem to worry then about being electrocuted by those batteries when he was 43 years old. Age has done a lot to Donald Trump. He now fears batteries on boats. The New York Times notes a semantic indicator of the aging brain of Donald Trump, reporting, proportionately, he uses 13% more all or nothing terms like always and never than he did 8 years ago, which some experts consider a sign of advancing age. Similarly, he uses 32% more negative words than positive words now, compared with 21% in 2016, which can be another indicator of cognitive change. And he uses swear words 69% more often than he did when he first ran, a trend that could reflect what experts call dysfunction. Elizabeth Lynn Cheney, as it happens, was born in Wisconsin in 1966. Her parents were graduate students at the University of Wisconsin. 112 years before that, the Republican Party was born in Wisconsin. Liz Cheney was born a Republican. When she was in elementary school, her father was deputy chief of staff in the Republican White House and President Gerald Ford. Dick Cheney moved up to White House chief of staff in the Ford White House, then ran for Congress in Wyoming, then Secretary of Defense for the first President Bush, then Vice President for the second President Bush. Liz Cheney is more Republican than anyone named Trump ever could be, because no one in Donald Trump's family actually believes in anything.
In 1976, when I was 10 years old, and I was sealing envelopes for President Ford's re-election campaign, I cast my first vote ever in 1984 for Ronald Reagan. I served in the State Department in both Bush administrations, and I served in the United States House of Representatives for 3 terms, including as the 3rd highest ranking Republican in House leadership. So, in other words, I was a Republican even before Donald Trump started spray tanning.
Liz Cheney went to the small town in Wisconsin today where the Republican Party was born, in the hope that what she had to say would be heard by Republicans like her, who have never voted for a Democrat in their lives.
I know that our security and our freedom depend upon a world in which America, with our allies, leads. And above all else, I know that the most conservative of conservative values is fidelity to our Constitution.
know that she will be a president for all Americans. As a conservative, as a patriot, as a mother, as someone who reveres our Constitution, I am honored to join her in this urgent cause.
Liz Cheney echoed her role as chief Republican investigator of Donald Trump on the January 6th committee.
When Donald Trump woke up on the morning of January 6th, 2021, his intention, despite having lost the election, was that he would remain president. Rather than accept his loss and concede defeat, he had spent months overseeing a multi-part plan to attempt to seize power and remain in office. He ignored the rulings of the courts. He corruptly pressured state legislatures, including here in Wisconsin, to overturn the results of their elections. Donald Trump watched the attack on television for hours,
What were you doing in the sink?
Sitting in the dining room next to the Oval Office, he refused repeated pleas from his family, from his closest advisors, from the most senior officials in his campaign and in our government to tell the mob to leave. And when Donald Trump finally did speak publicly after hours of violence, after the Capitol had been invaded, he praised the rioters. He did not condemn them. That's who Donald Trump is. Those facts do not come from Donald Trump's political opponents. Those facts come from the people closest to him. They are the ones who testified that Donald Trump did not want to stop the violent attack on our Capitol. When he learned that Vice President Pence was not going to abandon his oath and help Trump seize power, Trump sent out a tweet attacking Pence and further inflaming the mob. One of Trump's aides testified that shortly after that, this aide received a phone call alerting him that the vice president had been evacuated for his own safety from his office off the floor of the Senate. This aide recalled rushing to the dining room to tell Trump, hoping that this information would convince him to take immediate action to ensure the vice president's safety. Instead, after this aide delivered that news, Donald Trump looked up at him and said, "So what?" He said, "So what?" Donald Trump was willing to sacrifice our Capitol to allow law enforcement officers to be beaten and brutalized in his name and to violate the law and the Constitution in order to seize power for himself. I don't care if you are a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. That is depravity, and we must never become numb to it. Any person who would do these things can never be trusted with power again. We must defeat Donald Trump on November 5th.
We've never seen anything like January 6th until Donald Trump. And we have never seen anything like Liz Cheney campaigning against the Republican candidate for president, trying to elect a Democrat, until Donald Trump. Nowhere in our political history did a large collection of prominent party members turn against their party's nominee for president the way Liz Cheney and so many other prominent Republicans, including her father, have turned against Donald Trump. In the first year of Donald Trump's political candidacy, 2015, I said at the time, if you don't have